Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Life Science Rundown. This is Nicholas Capman with the FDA Group. Before we jump into our discussion for today, just a little bit about the FDA Group. We help life science companies in the areas of quality assurance, regulatory affairs, clinical operations, commissioning, qualification, and validation, as well as CMC. We offer 3 different engagement models, which are consulting, staff augmentation, and full-time employee recruitment. So if you ever find yourself in need, just head over to thefdagroup.com, check us out, and get in touch. So today I am speaking with Jonathan Wacks. How you doing, Jonathan?
I'm doing great. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for joining me today. So the topic for today is how to minimize the stress of an FDA audit. And I'm sure that our audience is going to appreciate this topic because we all have, well, not all of us, but a large majority of us understand the stress that's associated with an FDA audit. So why do many companies face collective anxiety when going through an FDA audit? Let's start there. And actually, I apologize. Introduce yourself before we jump into the topic.
Sure. My name is John Wacks, and I've spent about 30 years in the healthcare space, specifically design control, regulatory affairs, quality assurance in both the device, diagnostic, and combination products and pharmaceutical spaces.
Okay, fantastic. So with that intro, did you want to jump into that first question?
Sure. I think it's important to understand that FDA's roots go back as an enforcement agency. They were an agency created by Congress due to serious public health concerns, going back almost to the 1920s, and then reinforced in the 1938 Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And make no mistake, they have the right to inspect any food, drug, device, or cosmetics facility. They do not require a warrant to enter your premises, which is kind of interesting. And they do not have to provide you with any notice, or they don't have to give you an appointment. They can just simply flash a badge and show up. And the courts have traditionally, in the name of protecting the public health and safety, they give them a very wide berth in terms of they have search and seizure powers. They can, quote unquote, impose a voluntary recall. And via the Department of Justice, they can levy fines, penalties, and issue a consent decree, which the court can mandate what you can or cannot do. Point of history, the Drug Enforcement Agency, or that portion for narcotics control, was part of the FDA, and it was eventually split off by Congress because the industry felt it problematic that during audits, the inspector would take off his or her jacket and show a Colt 1945. So the enforcement part of that was actually split off because of industry concerns. So there is reason why you might have some anxiety with an FDA audit.
Makes sense. What types of audits does the FDA perform?
So let's break it down into the following classifications. The first is a routine on-site inspection. FDA contacts you via phone, via email, via fax, whatever, and says, hey, we want to come audit your facility. Typically, they'll give you about a week notice, and they're somewhat amenable to, if there are folks traveling, they'll give you some time to pull your personnel together. The other one is they can do a remote or desktop audit in lieu of an on-site. They were doing that quite a bit during COVID. I actually had several of them, and they just don't have the on-site inspection, but they're pretty much doing the same thing. The third is what's called a for-cause inspection, and you can ask them, hey, is this a for-cause inspection? They'll tell you. There's no reason why they won't. And it's never good because a for-cause implies typically there's a whistleblower event where something you've done is been told in a surreptitious way or an anonymous way to Food and Drug, and they know what they're looking for. In fact, I had a friend of mine who had a for-cause audit, and they actually went into a room, went to a file cabinet, and pulled an actual file. And once again, that's never good. And now, under certain congressional changes to the legislation, they can also have what's called a request for records, where they can simply call you up and say, hey, send me your CAPA, or hey, send me your design control file. And it really has the same effect or enforcement as an on-site or a remote audit.
Mm-hmm. Now, with these different types of audits, obviously, the audience listening to this podcast wants to make sure that they're prepared and ready to handle these types of audits. And a common phrase is being audit ready. So how would you describe being audit ready?
So if you're a firm that's operating in the healthcare space, drugs, devices, diagnostics, biologics, call it what you may, you essentially, for all intents and purposes, have to be audit ready. So what does that term mean? So let's assume that FDA or ISO or MDSAP auditors, for that measure, they just walk into your facility without notice, because under the ISO, MedSAP, or FDA requirements, you have to be subject to a non-scheduled audit. They flash a badge, open your door, and say, "Hey, I'm here to audit." And your firm, especially their leadership team, have to ask themselves, and with all the business and the usual shipping and problems and customers coming in and personnel quitting and all that normal stuff of the hectic life that we all live, can I successfully host an FDA inspection at a moment's notice? And by extension, if a customer has a problem, they have a concern, they're staring down a recall, or they have patient or safety issues, and they show up, can I successfully host a key customer audit as well? And if your leadership team kind of says, no, we really can't do that, there's just too much going on, you're simply not audit ready.
Good point. One thing I wanted to get into is the QCIT audit. Obviously, that's a topic of discussion that we get into. Can you maybe explore that a little bit?
Sure. QCIT is an FDA term. You won't really see it in any other industry. It's an acronym for Quality System Inspection Technique. And if you want some more information, FDA has a wonderful website. It's massive. You may need a little help, or you may need a little time navigating it. But there is actually I believe it's a 100-page document that'll in detail tell you what a QCIT is. They call it QCIT Guide. And it essentially employs a set of flowcharts, which really devolve into a Faulknerian, what I call stream of consciousness approach to inspection. And what they'll do is take the 21 CFR that you're subject to, whether it's 820, 210, 211, whatever it is, and they will look at each subsection of the quality management system, or QMS, and they will do an interrogative. And that interrogative is intended to, does your firm meet that quality management system element? And can they make a decision flowchart for that QMS? And what that means is, think of it as you have a fabric, and their job is they're going to look at a QMS element, and they're going to start pulling at that thread of the fabric, intent of seeing if they can get that fabric to unravel. And if you have a really good auditor, for your own internal audits as well, think of it as, well, something, why don't you open up your complaint file or your nonconformance file? Have to have that by regulation, and then say, pull that one. Say, well, that's interesting. That has a kappa. Can I see that kappa? That's interesting. That required an SOP update. Can I see that SOP update? And go, that's interesting. Can you show me the training record of those people that had to be retrained to the SOP update? And then you go, well, that's interesting. Can you show me that there was never a recurrence of that complaint or nonconformance? And in a very rapid fashion, you can walk through a variety of QMS elements and come to that decision flowchart on whether you comply. And it's a really effective technique, and can be often very, very embarrassing if you don't have your story together.
Yeah, makes sense. So for the audience, how can you practice and prepare for an FDA audit?
Well, you can certainly, absolutely, and positively practice for an FDA audit. And in fact, I'm sure the FDA group probably does what are called mock audits, where a firm,
We certainly do. Thank you.
yeah, where you'll have an experienced auditor who has nothing to do with the firm say, hey, I'm just going to look at your QMS as if I were a third party or an MD SAP, an ISO, an FDA auditor. And a lot of companies use third party firms such as the FDA group. And it's a really good way to establish what your baseline is. How good are you doing? And often, like a new CEO or new vice president of quality might say, you know, I want to really bring in a third party to really give me an unvarnished view on how effective my QMS is. And essentially, they come in and they will pull the regulation or pull the QSIT guide and actually take the company through a simulated FDA audit. And what's really important is not the audit. What's really important is for that auditor to sit down with the leadership team and in a very frank and in a very earnest and honest assessment, really go through, hey, here's where you're strong, here's where you're weak, and here are the lessons that are learned from this audit. And it's really essential to take those lessons learned and to say, well, here's the work we need to do, but equally important, here's how we need to strengthen our own internal audit, because the question should be, if that third party found it, how come our internal audit didn't find it? And I think it's really essential and really critical to understand that if you have divisions or you have an operating entity or you have a site that does whatever, design, manufacturing process, servicing, it doesn't make a difference. If they are not more concerned about the impact of your internal audit, you've got a serious problem, because the only way you will know what's going on is the basis of the internal audit. And in previous life, when I had internal auditors, A, I never edited the audit under any condition, and B, it always went to the C-suite, the CEO, the CFO, and the COO, and they were the ones to go, holy cow, I'm seeing major nonconformances or minor nonconformances. What do we need to do to plug these holes and plug them quickly?
Great point. So let's say you're in the middle of remediating your QMS. What would you say are the set of priorities?
So I think the priorities are pretty clear. First thing is, if you have a 483 or you have hopefully not a warning letter and definitely not a consent decree, you have to immediately jump on that. You have no choice but to come up with a thoughtful and effective response to the 483. And if you look at the current warning letters, 99% of them were because the FDA finds your response to be ineffective. So do not, and I repeat, never do a half-baked 483. Just send them an email or correspondence and say, hey, like, we're working on it. We will give you this date when we will give it to you, but under no condition do you do a poorly thought through response. So that's the first priority you want to take care of. Once you have the 483s or whatever you have, any formal actions by Food and Drug completed, my first comment would be first product, production, and process. What do I mean by that? Well, in terms of the product, you can't have bad product go out the door. Okay, you can't. You've got it. That's hemorrhaging. You're bleeding. You're only creating problems in the field. And what do I mean by that? If you have test methods that you're using, you better make sure they're valid or make sure they're verified. If you're using a USP test, be verified. You have your own unique test equipment, you have to validate it. And without validated test equipment, the testing results, it's fruit of the forbidden tree. You're just making junk because you don't know if your testing results are truly reflective of the product quality. And then next thing I would say is make sure your test equipment is calibrated, make sure it's maintained, and make sure you have SOPs and trained personnel. And then you better make sure that you have good integrity of those records. You can't lose data. You can't in any way have the records adulterated or somehow falsified, and you want to make sure you have a good chain of custody on that data. And then lastly, you need to make sure that there is an independent batch record review. So whatever you're shipping out the door, you have a clear understanding of the status of that lot as well as its data and its data integrity. So once your product is squared away, the next thing I would look at priority is your process. And what I mean by that is you need to review your processes and rethink and revise those QMS processes. Make sure they're really up to snuff. I would first focus on your validation and verification, or your V&V procedures. Focus on, as we discussed, test method validation first. Look at your manufacturing process validation. See if your SOPs and your validation are still valid. Are they still in sync? Have you made changes? And I would also, after looking at your process, again, you don't want to keep hemorrhaging. Look at your product validation. How clean are your stability data? Have you done the human factors? Have you done the necessary product validation, depending on your industry, if you're food or drug? Do you need to revalidate your processes? Has something substantially changed that might require a revalidation? You would definitely, after you looked at your testing and then your product and process, you would follow with software validation. And specifically, I think the priority on software would be if you were, say, a pharmaceutical company using extensive software in the lab. If you look at the rash, and I talk about 20, even 30 over the last 18 months of pharmaceutical companies being just torn apart because of potential fraud or manipulation of data due to software issues, that is definitely a priority in terms of where you need to be. And then lastly, again, looking at your product and then looking at your processes, without a question, your complaint handling, your nonconformance investigation, and your CAPA procedures. And just to be clear, nonconformance is a nonconformance. A complaint is that unique to alleged nonconformance in the field, and a complaint always takes priority over an internal nonconformance. But how do you manage them? How do you sort them? How do you do a trend analysis? Equally important, do you have an investigation methodology? Do you have a problem-solving methodology? Can you arrive at a root cause analysis? If you're in the pharmaceutical industry, the focus on is that infamous OOS. Do you have a phase 1? Do you have a phase 2 investigation? And can you clearly show if you had a funky test result in the lab, is it because of sampling? Is it because of the oops on the equipment? Did the operator not do something? And before you start retesting, you better have some really ironclad understanding on how that OOS is to be investigated. And again, just want to reiterate, you do not have to have a CAPA for every complaint or every nonconformance. You have to have a rationale and justification as to why you are trending, when is an actionable item, and it is something that you can say we will monitor. And without that justification or rationale, you will have 2 million CAPAs and nothing will ever get done.
Makes sense. So earlier on, we talked about being FDA ready. Let's say you have a scheduled FDA audit. How would you prepare yourself for that particular situation?
Well, my first comment would be best practice is to write an audit SOP, what to do. Because if you don't have a playbook, you're going to wing it and you will make mistakes. And there's a variety of technical as well as human issues that need to be addressed prior to starting that audit. So, and if you can do a mock audit, give your team some simulated experience, again, contact the FDA group, get somebody in there and really take that firm through, or division or site through its paces. But typically, unless it's a for cause audit where they show up and knock on your door, the agency will usually call the quality representative. That's the person who is on the annual registration, and they'll either email them or phone them or leave a message, and they'll notify you that, hey, this is so and so from the FDA, and I want to do an on-site audit. And just by the way, please, 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 if there's been a change in personnel or there's been a new email that your company, a new email address, or it's been purchased or it's been renamed, you need to update that. In fact, a buddy of mine got yelled at by an auditor, actually knocked on the door and said, wait a second, I've audited you before. You guys know what you're doing. How come you're not responding to me? They had made an email change and had never notified FDA. So please keep your contact information current. But first thing you need to do is tell your leadership team. And you need to do what I would call a personnel inventory. You know who has to be there during the audit. Typically, it's going to be your design control or your pharmaceutical development staff. It's going to be your manufacturing, your validation, your quality folks. Where are they? Are they available? And you are certainly well within your right to tell FDA, say, look, I'd like to make sure we have a great audit. And could you give me, I'll get everybody on Thursday as opposed to Monday. They're traveling. And by and large, they're extremely amenable to that. There's not much of an issue with that. And once you know that everyone's available, I would go through the facility and just make sure it's presentable. And when I'm talking about by that, get all these extraneous papers off folks' desks. There's no reason why the FDA should be walking around going, that's an interesting piece of data. Let's take a look at that. Make sure everyone's presentable. I've always said, hey, why don't everybody show up with their logo on there? That way you look like, oh, well, you're actually staff here, and you're in production or you're in engineering or something. And best practice is meet anyone who's involved in the audit, spend a half an hour and kind of go through that SOP. Answer the question. Never in any way lie or misrepresent something. Answer what you need to be answered, no more, no less. Be cordial, be professional. There's nothing to worry about. As my mother said, or actually Mark Twain said, if you always tell the truth, you don't have to remember the lie. And best practice in my experience, you set up a front office and a back office. Your back office is often a war room. Front office, no more than 2 or 3 people that would be with the FDA inspector. 10 people in the room, it looks like it's a intimidation. It's not really acceptable, not even warranted. The first person in that room should be responsible for talking to the back office. In other words, the FDA says, oh, I'd like to see these 3 complaints. The person should be there. Make sure you have your communication established. I need these records. Okay, you should be like the swan that's on the lake where they're gliding through, but underneath they're paddling furiously. That's your back office's responsibility. All chaos is go, where's that record? I don't know. Wait a second, they're updating it. Should I give them the update? And all that communication should be with that person. You should be on Teams if you're facing the FDA and say, yep, we're working on it. By the way, there is an update. I'm going to give you the existing record, but see if we can run down that update as well. And it's really important to actually simulate that. Make sure you have your Zoom or your email or whatever, however you're talking internally, make sure it's working. You don't want to have a gap in comm on that. And equally important, it sounds crazy, but you may your little Canon all-in-one copier and printer and whatnot, put a sign that says, please do not use this. This is for the audit, because there is nothing worse than somebody printing out a 500-page document and you have an auditor sitting there waiting for that information. It is just rude and it is just devastating if that happens. So think about that. It really makes a big difference.
Great insight. So I bet a lot of people listening are wondering, is there any way to know what the FDA investigator is going to ask?
So, was it all fear is love and war and FDA audits, I guess? The answer is not really. In theory, the QSIT, or the routine inspection QMS element review is where they would start. That being said, historically, that doesn't always happen. And let me explain to you why. If you were to monitor and review every published 483, every letter, every published consent decree. If you're seeing a trend, like, for example, Part 11 in data integrity, they're shutting down, giving warning letters to pharmaceutical companies because they go out to the garbage can outside the lab and they find all kinds of testing results that just sitting in there, or they go through files on your computer system and find all kinds of unknown files and things like that, and they're writing everybody up. They may come in your shop and say, I'm going right now to your analytical lab. I want to see who validated that software. I want to see the last 50 runs. And they may ignore all the niceties of a QIT audit. Something really to monitor very carefully. So if you're seeing things in your space, in other words, if you're a device manufacturer and you're doing electronic communication of some kind with that device, and you see, say, a guidance document on cybersecurity, if they're issuing guidance documents about something, there's usually a very, very good reason. If there's an artificial intelligence component to a piece of software as a medical device, be prepared that they may say, nah, I'm not really interested in design control. Show me the algorithm and show me how you validated the algorithm associated with your machine learning. So really, it's important to do that. The other real source of kind of guessing or predicting what FDA would do, they do, and again, it's on their website. It takes a little time to navigate, but there's a lot of really bright people at FDA that kind of work at the inspection level, and those who really work at like the 30 or 60,000 foot, where they're saying a review of the last 5 years of 535 43s, nonconformances, warning letters, whatever. We broke this down in the device space. 40% of all recalls were because of poor design control, right? And 5% were because of design changes. Well, I mean, big animal picture, they're probably going to look at your design control and try to understand, is there a reason why there are concerns that might require a recall? So again, you can't necessarily know what they're worried about. For example, 20 years ago, there were serious issues about label copy. A whole bunch of buddies of mine, FDA spent 3 days there looking at your label copy. So again, can you predict it? No, but by looking at what they're publishing, you should have a fairly good idea of what their concerns are.
Right. So they're on site. I think a good thing to share is, what are some of the pitfalls or the, do not do's that the audience should be aware of when they're on site?
So, okay. The number one issue is never act like a jerk. I mean, it sounds obvious, but people have a tendency to get defensive or scared in an unprofessional way. And what I mean by that is no one in your staff or in your firm should be arrogant, condescending, combative, or just plain miserable to deal with. Remember, the inspector in front of you, human being, they got kids, they got a significant other, they have fights, they come to work sometimes in a bad mood, but the reality is they're all really professional. And, let's put it this way, they have a lot of options. They're usually really bright and smart people. They can do many things, and they actually have a mission. They actually take their dedication, responsibilities to maintain public safety. They take it quite seriously. And, levity and sarcasm are inappropriate in that venue. And I can only tell you, I've been doing this for, I don't know, been front office direct with FDA for more than 20 years. And I can only tell you the arc I see is FDA is very sensitive to the power of
Hey, Jonathan, you cut out. You said the FDA is very sensitive to the power. Could you repeat that?
Sure. I mean, the FDA inspector has quite a bit of A, discretion, and B, power really potentially impact your firm. They know that. The FDA is very sensitive to that. And they have very, very strong training and very personal responsibility that they provide their inspectors. And if you act in a professional and cordial way, they will act in a professional and cordial way. And it food and drug is going to be at your facility. And you will always hear your share, or certainly I've heard of my share of these FDA horror stories. And this inspector was terrible. They did this. Then they and I hear them. Not been my experience. And whenever I hear that story, I kind of listen to that person and go, yeah, I now understand why they had a horror story. This person acted like a jerk. And I can only tell you that don't. The second issue is that don't have the second thing I would strongly consider is avoid any kind of delays responding to inspectors' request for a document, a record, or a direct answer to a question they pose. It could really be a death sentence if you have very, very long delays. I've done mock audits, and I would request from my staff in the past, think of a 60-second rule. If you cannot record or a document or a validation protocol or an SOP or something in 60 seconds, it's very bad. They usually have a tremendous amount of ground to cover, and they need a cadence flow of communication. And you get these pregnant pauses waiting. It can be awkward, and it does not set a very good tone for the audit. And they sit there and they're in the record, they can't find it or whatever. It really indicates whether you have your act together. In fact, I consulted for a firm that had a consent decree, and one of the things they had is it took them close to 2 weeks to find a validation document. And their question was, well, if you can't find the document, how do you know if you even have to revalidate it or if it's any good? And that's just never very good. The third issue is, I call it getting rattled. And you're really reinforcing your staff to maintain a state of mindfulness, to use a kind of a new age term, but the awareness of the moment. What I mean by that is, the inspector asks you a question, just answer that question. No need to provide interpretation or need to provide to go on. They ask the question and answer the question. I don't mean yes or no. I mean answer the question. And if you don't know the answer, and I underline this, it's perfectly fine to say, well, I don't know. Let me find it. And, I can find that out. It may take some time to find that out. I need to find that individual, or I need to find that record. It's not available under the 60-second rule. And make sure that you do have an answer. But to say, I don't know, let me find out, is perfectly fine. No need to make something up or go off on a riff that's getting rattled. And equally important, you're going to have one person who's the lead or quality rep in that room. And if the quality rep says, well, I believe it's X, and you're maybe the SME or you may be brought in, never say, no, that's not true. Okay, you can say, I see what you said. Let me just double check that. And then quietly, during lunch, you can say to the rep, we kind of got that wrong, and let me show you what we got. And you, okay, no problem. And then the rep can then clarify or make a restatement going, well, I just spoke to the SME. I was a bit concerned, or I wasn't sure. And I just want let me restate that that's actually not the answer. That's not the correct answer. And that's perfectly fine. Again, they want to cover a lot of room. They want to cover a lot of ground. And if you are getting contradictions on everything you say, then all of a sudden you've got some, do you have your act together? Are you communicating as a company? Why are you fighting in front of me? Never do that. And again, don't get rattled.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I've seen some warning letters come up that have shown that the warning letter was issued because of a refusal to provide records. So a question that I have for you is, when can you tell the FDA no? When is that acceptable?
So can you tell FDA on certain things no? The answer is absolutely. You can't way offend them. You know, they know the rules of the road, and the fact that you know them and they know them is perfectly professional and can be, as long as it's done in a respectful and cordial way, you can say things like no. Let's talk about the things you can say yes about first. One thing is that if a inspector comes to your facility, you are, they will expect that you are well within your right. Can I see your credentials? You will have a, again, they are an enforcement arm. They will have an ID and they will have a badge number. You can report it, meaning you can write it down. They will tell you they cannot, for their own security, they will not allow you to photocopy it or take an image of it. You can also say to them, I see your credentials. I'm sure you are indeed inspector. I'd like to phone the local office. I live in the Chicago area. You call the office at 555 West Jackson. And or you go to their website and you can look them up and say, yes, that individual is indeed that person. Excuse me. And you can say, yep, you are indeed an inspector. You will not in any way be insulted. They know there's all kinds of lunatics running around that are doing all kinds of crazy things, impersonating government employees. The other thing is you can say to that individual, if you want to go through the facility, I really want or need to escort you all over, not because you're worried about them seeing something, but there are often safety issues. They may be challenged because of concern. Are you looking at my computer? You know, in that way you could go with them and say, no, they have the right to look at a record or something like that. And they completely understand that. Thirdly, you can absolutely mandate, and you should, if they're going to a clean room, class or they're looking at an area where there are hazardous materials being used. They're walking around a warehouse with tailings and lifts. If you need to run through a quick safety seminar and get a record from them that they took that safety class, you are well within your right, because you cannot put a government employee or any visitor for that matter in unacceptable safety. And they understand that, and they will absolutely comply with this, and that they will say yes to. In terms of, you can also state to them, you cannot photograph in this facility. Understand that. They can ask for a record or a document. They do not have the right to record or photograph anything in the facility. And I've seen many firms, in fact, one of the large companies I work with, every site at the receptionist desk, it says, you are not, welcome to this facility. You are not allowed to record or photograph anything. You are on private property. It is not a public domain where it's assumed you can record anything you'd like. And the FDA understands that, and they will not record nor photograph anything. That's the things you can do. In addition, if you're having a discussion with a drug inspector and they ask you for something, and you can say to them, look, this regulation I'm citing, or this is the guidance document I'm citing, and I respectfully don't have to do that. For example, FDA inspectors, they may be doing pharmaceutical work, they may be doing device work, they may be doing diagnostic work, they may not know of the many scores of guidance documents, and have received that training yet. There's a lot of inspectors they're running into training all the time. They may not have got the latest document. So, for example, I had an audit where for contract manufacturer, and they wanted to see our MDR file. And there was a guidance document that said contract manufacturers do not have to issue MDRs because they have a device, they're just manufacturing things. And planes, even though they provide the contract manufacturer that information, they don't have to require that. And he said that's not the case. I cited the new regulation, and he, again, very professional, very cordial, and goes, let me check manager about that. Next day he came in, he goes, yep, apparently there is indeed the guidance document. I showed it to him, and he goes, I just haven't received the training on it. That you can certainly do. Again, be professional, be respectful, and you can certainly disagree. What you cannot say yes to, or you cannot say no to, actually, you cannot deny the inspector any access to any place, or under the 5 kilometer rule, I think, your campus. So have any area, and they want to go to the bathroom, they want to go to your lab, they want to go to a shed, a gardening shed, got to give them access. That's great in the regulation. If you not, the audit is over. Consider this audit over and can put an import alert, or they can put in a desist order. It's something that is absolutely forbidden. You also cannot deny the inspector access to any site personnel. You know, if they want accounting, you cannot deny the inspector any access to your site personnel. If they want to walk through the building and go into the finance department and start asking them questions, your personnel can say, look, I'm not involved in any of the regulated or QMS, I'm in accounting. They can say, oh, okay, and walk away, but you cannot deny access to any site personnel. And that would be a very bad thing. You cannot deny the inspector access to any QMS related document or record. And if they want that validation protocol or results or the batch record or the SOP, you must provide it to them, and they have the right to copy it and take it with them as part of their records. Best practice, what I would recommend, any document you provide to FDA, make sure you have a log, make sure you have a record that was taken. I ID it, say, not for QMS use, for audit purposes only, and make sure you keep it. They may be referencing or citing documents in a potential follow-up, and I'd make sure that you don't want to get there. What document are they talking about? And you want to make sure that you have that best practice in place. However, what you can say no to in terms of QMS documents, and I've had this before, they say, hey, can I see your internal audit records? Now, they do not have the right to inspect those internal audit records. That was an agreement made by the industry decades ago, because otherwise you wouldn't do internal audits, right? Mm-hmm. And you, however, have to show them the internal. So if you have in your quality management, be doing these audits during fiscal year 20 whatever, then it was last year, they should say, hey, where are those audits? You can show it to them. You can show that it's a signed document. There's audit content, but you do not have to share the results of that internal audit. Again, they can ask, and you can respectfully and professionally, that is not a requirement to provide it. However, I will give you my quality management annual review, which calls out the 6 audits that I have to do, and here are the results of those audits. So those are things that you can say no to, with the exception on records associated with.
Okay, very good. So you're done with the FDA audit and you've gotten a 483. Now what?
Well, you got a 483. And honestly, prefer not to have one. It's not the end of the world. Okay. The question is, how do you manage it? So the first thing is, if an inspector, we're giving you what's called a Form 483. A 482 is a notice of investigation or audit. A 483 are the observations associated with that audit, just for those who are just in the FDA parlance. So never, ever become argumentative or combative with the inspector. It will add value whatsoever, and that is neither the time nor place nor to start an argument with the inspector. They've made up their mind, they're going to read up, and you becoming, again, acting like a jerk is going to help. It's only going to hurt. And that being said, you're well within your right to say, look, I am going to this regulation, or I will cite this guidance document, and here's why I feel that you may want to reconsider that 483 element. So, for example, you do a risk assessment and you decide that you don't have to revalidate, and the FDA inspector says you should have revalidated. Okay, you're well within your right to say, "Well, wait a second. It's not like we didn't consider this beginning. We did a risk assessment, we documented it, and this is why I feel that we didn't validate." And you agree and we agree. We do this on the basis of risk assessment. We've met that. We have a rationale justification. Can you rethink that? 3. And the reflection may say, I think right. I'll go with that. I'll allow it. Again, be professional, be cordial, assertive. Nothing wrong with that. But state the regulation or the guidance document that would support what decision you made in the past. I would say if there's a 483 being issued, before they leave, first thing you could say, this has happened to me in the past, if you had a good audit, and like 99% of your audit worked out well, but they said, hey, look, you really have to issue a 483 on that. You can say, hey, I'll tell you what, I think we can fix this right now. Can we fix it right now? And I'll give you that tomorrow morning. And don't write me up on a 483 or while I'm here. I've had that several times. If they're going, well, just change that, and that way we don't have to have a 483. Do everything you can, rush that through your document control process, get that taken care of. And again, that's why you want to be cordial, because they do have quite a bit of latitude, and that could avoid potentially, even though they've told you they're going to issue you. Regardless, if you are issued one, make sure you can. I want to respond. I want an effective response. Here's what I'm planning to do. Do you think that's sufficient? And by and large, they'll say, yeah, but add that. Consider that lot failed, but look at the other lots made at the same time, or the cousins of those products. Oh, okay, I'll put that in the bullet point. Let's agree on that. And that way, when you have to respond to 483, you just get buy-in from that inspector as to what bar you have to hit in order to resolve that issue. And again, you have that individual in front of you, and if it's a cordial and professional inspection, and they found issues, see if you can get their input, but get bullet points. Hopefully, you can get a green on. And again, remember, it's not the end of the world. Do understand you have to give them a timely response. You do need to give them updates. You should not be getting an email going, hey, guys, I'm waiting for a response. Very, very bad. Make sure you're timely. If you have to delay because you need to put the data, say to them, it's going to take us 30 days. We're getting back to you in 2 weeks and 30 days. You're going to have to clean it up. You don't have a choice. If you don't clean it up, you're looking at a warning letter. The first thing you have with a warning letter is any new devices or drugs that are under review that get suspended, and you've just given your competitor a huge up because it will just shut down your pipeline. You don't want that. The thing about it is really important to understand. It's very frustrating to many people. FDA will never tell you you've cleaned up that 483. Do not expect that. They probably will. The next time they're there, they will follow up and say, oh, I see. Okay, so I turned it into a CAPA. I see the bullet. I saw the deliverables. Yeah, I think you've done that. Let's move on. But they will never send you a formal notice that 483 is closed. That will never happen. And the reason why is actually very simple. If you look at the Form 483, which you can get on their website, there is a disclaimer at the bottom that says, and I don't have the verbiage in front of me, unfortunately, but it says, these observations only represent, the findings of the inspector, and it is the responsibility of the firm to ensure that all QMS elements are sufficiently in compliance with CGMP or similar language. And if they were to say, oh, you've done good, you've closed this 483, what they're essentially saying is you have full CGMP compliance. They will never state that unless they did a full end-to-end audit, which you would not want. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. That would be if you're in a consent decree or full cause. So you're never going to get a response that says you're done. Okay, and it's important to understand. You have to make sure your management understands that, because they're going to say, hey, have we put this behind us? The answer is it doesn't work that way. But make sure you can ideally glean as much information from the inspector to resolve the issue. Make sure you have timely, and make sure that you have effective responses to those 483s, and then move ahead. But once again, it's not the end of the world. Deal with it. Be cordial. Be professional. And again, you'll take the stress out of that whole FDA audit experience.
Okay. Well, Jonathan, this was awesome information. I really appreciate your insights. I think the audience is really going to benefit from this. So really appreciate your time and insight. And for everybody listening, as always, if you find conversations like this valuable, please share it with a colleague or your professional network. If you haven't already, please subscribe to get updates of new episodes at thefdagroup.com/podcast, and follow the FDA group on LinkedIn. If you'd like to connect about project or resource needs, head over to thefdagroup.com to get in touch. Or feel free to connect with me personally on LinkedIn. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you.